Unfiltered, where we retrace the stories that shape the vast aspects of American society. I'm Jake.
And I'm Christos, and today we're going to dive into the effects of organized crime on American culture. The mob didn't just work in the shadows and on underground networks, but they helped define the look, feel, and the rhythm of the times that they took place in.
Yeah, like usual, let's start with the Prohibition era. And although we already went into greater depth on this era in the last episode and even the first one as well, speaking about the economic and political effects of the era through organized crime, the cultural impact is what we'll be focusing on today.
Yeah. And as we've already mentioned, the mob had an insanely tight grip on the distribution of illegal alcohol, and as a result, they ran many underground bars and speakeasies, and these underground jazz clubs shaped the nightlife of what was the earliest 20th century. Bootleggers were smugglers of illegal goods, and they became heroes of the customers of these underground clubs and heroes of these people.
Mm-hmm. This shift during the Prohibition era in the early 1940s helped turn crime into entertainment. You can draw clear connections between the speakeasy culture in the 20s and the birth of the noir culture in the 40s. The unknown and mysterious world of underground crime that was usually unrecognized by the general public began to make its way into the spotlight of American culture.
Yeah, and the connection between crime and storytelling only grew. By the 70s, movies like The Godfather and Goodfellas were cultural milestones, and I think we can both agree they're great movies. And
I mean, they're absolutely phenomenal.
Yeah, but these films didn't portray the mob, they romanticized it.
Exactly. They really took guys like those mob bosses in those movies and glorified them. But
yeah, it made you want to be them almost.
Just pause for a moment here. Why do you think that America fell in love with the mob culture and these gangsters? Why do you think that? It's pretty interesting.
Because of the romantification, like in these movies and in these TV shows, like The Sopranos. We'll talk about it a little bit later.
Mm-hmm. Like, what do you think? What specific aspects of these characters that they and how they wrote these characters do you think appealed to the American audience?
I think it was this idea that you can be the self-made man. You can be nobody and turn into somebody. And many people chose to ignore the overall violent and dangerous aspects of mobsters and focus on the fact that these gangsters came from nothing. And they exemplified the American dream, coming from immigrant roots, discrimination, and poverty, which resonated with urban Americans.
Yeah, remember that's the American dream, coming from nothing and using this American capitalist economy to build up into a great family with all this wealth.
Coming with $2 in your pocket and turning it into something that can build a new family.
Mm-hmm. You know, I also think that people are intrigued by the contradiction in the way mobsters lived. Many gangsters wore expensive, tailored suits, made large donations to their local churches, and threw lavish and extravagant weddings and celebrations. But simultaneously, ran extortion rackets and controlled underground illegal markets. Even the rise of one of the most famous cities in the world was largely credited to organized crime, and that would be none other than Las Vegas.
100%. I couldn't agree with you more.
Yes.
And especially when we talk about the Flamingo Hotel, built by Bugsy Siegel in the 1940s, who was a huge mobster of the time. And it was the blueprint for the Flamingo Hotel, of course, was the blueprint for the modern Vegas Strip. And for decades, the mob ran the casinos, and it was using it as an extra source of passive income and an outlet for underground commodities. And the fusion of Vegas and its glamour and its vice and power embedded itself into the American culture, all completely started by the mob.
Yeah, I mean, listen, you think of America, you think of Vegas sometimes. You think of that, going out to the casino, maybe making a few bucks, but 30 years ago, that was mob controlled, and, they had a tight grip on that.
Yeah, and then there's impact on the immigrant communities. Italian Americans, for instance, were often unfairly stereotyped as mob connected just because of who they were, and that burden came from the real world crime, yes, but also from the Hollywood obsession with the mob drama.
Yeah, I don't know if you know how the city breaks down, but like a lot of the times ethnic groups live in the same areas, and that's kind of how some of these like Jewish, Italian, Irish families built up, by living in the same areas. And Christos mentioned The Sopranos earlier, but the Sopranos episodes, they explored family and identity, similar to how these organized crime built up. And there's been a wave of assumptions and profiling in real life, so it's a double-edged sword. It's fascinating, but harmful as well.
Yeah, and we see by the late 20th century, again, mentioning RICO laws and the fall of these big families, that the mob lost its iron grip, it lost its rule. But its cultural power, it stayed strong. You see it in video games like Grand Theft Auto and series like Boardwalk Empire and The Sopranos. Like, they've definitely been romanticized in
You know,
places. In every
Chris,
place.
I don't know if you've played Grand Theft Auto, but that's a pretty crime-heavy game.
That is an
And
extremely
it is-
crime heavy.
It is a beloved game. I don't know if you know GTA 6 coming out soon.
Very
Everyone's
soon.
very excited for it. So it's actually very interesting. It seems like we've almost turned, as a country, organized crime into a brand. It says something, doesn't it?
It really, really does, Jake,
Mhm.
and it shows how deeply embedded the mob became in American imagination.
Mhm.
Not just as criminals, but as symbols of ambition, rebellion, and power, no matter what cost.
Of course. And maybe that's the real story. The 20th century wasn't just about what the mob did. It was what they represented. Like we said, the immigrant, coming across to America looking for that American dream, but maybe in a tinted, illegal way. But I think Americans were able to look over that and take it as it is, face value. I think it's a very interesting part of this organized crime unit.
Extremely. And that's going to be all for today's episode of A-Push Unfiltered. If you like the show, leave us a review and share it with a friend. Next week, we're shifting gears, and we're going to talk about how fast food reshaped the American landscape.
There you go. Till then, everyone stay curious.